Mike actually came up with the word aggregate.
Yeah.
Because he was like, oh, aggregate's an ingredient in concrete. And then we looked it up in the dictionary. And then I think the definition was aggregate is a combination of separate parts, to bring together. Yeah. And we're like, dude, that's perfect, because we're basically bringing, unconventional material of concrete and putting it into, refined watch.
If I told you that the future of watches consisted of a concrete dial and bezel, how would you respond? This week, join Jon and Mike as they discuss their first company, Aggregate, and their venture into entrepreneurship.
Hey guys, Mike here, and
Jon.
Jon Kai, and we're back again to talk about Aggregate today.
For Aggregate, really we just wanted to produce something and design something that was a little away from tech. Both of us had worked predominantly in technology and consumer electronics, and to be honest, we just got the entrepreneur itch, and we're searching for something that we could be passionate about and more on the artistic end, and watches was kind of the thing for that. So that's kind of how we fell into the category of watches. In terms of Aggregate, being a designer and Mike being an engineer, we're always looking for innovative perspectives to look at things. And so I think just walking along the streets and stuff like that, we're like, hey, can we make a watch with that? Can we make a bag with this? And we're just thinking of how to reappropriate materials into fashionable products. And just in terms of just thinking about entrepreneurship, we've done a lot of reading, done a lot of watching YouTube and stuff of other entrepreneurs, and it was our belief that you really can't start a quote-unquote side hustle. You really have to go all in to make something work. And so for Aggregate, we kind of just embraced that. And so I flew back from a plane in Taiwan during a work trip, and I was like, yeah, my kid's coming, my first kid is on the way, and I think this is just time to just quit. So yeah, called my boss, who I definitely appreciate the opportunity there and everything like that, and learned a lot there. I'm sure he wasn't too happy with the sudden quitting, but I think it was a good move.
For me, I'm not getting any younger. If I was going to enter entrepreneurship, I had to do it at a time that was opportune, and I saw that Jon was, he had, the opportunity arose, and so I kind of dove in with Jon to dive in on.
Converted him to the dark side, essentially.
Converted me to the dark side.
I don't think a lot of people know, we actually were friends at our previous place that we worked, and we were playing Pokemon Go, I think, during lunch breaks and things like that. Yeah. And that's how we had a trainer for work. We had a corporate trainer, so we would work out together, and then we would also, that's how we became friends. And then we would play Pokemon Go and things like that. And I think one of those days, I just straight up asked him, hey man, have you ever thought of starting your own thing? We're really inspired by our boss too, who built a $1 billion company from scratch. And so, I personally deep down had an entrepreneur itch, so I was playing Pokemon Go with Mike and asked him if he had the same thing. And
yeah, so for me at the time, back then, it was now or never. Jon had a kid on the way, and as I mentioned, I'm not getting any younger, so entrepreneurship was something that I wanted to always try in my life, and I took the opportunity to partner with Jon.
Mike's a really good partner for me because he challenges me in the right ways to look at things in a different perspective. So obviously we fight, like brothers. But at the same time, I think for a designer in particular, we're very free-spirited, and we think very innovatively and sometimes very blue sky and idealistic. And I think as a partner, he kind of allows and synergizes with that and builds on that too. So for me, that's what I like, and the fact that he understands the work-life balance that we have to do as entrepreneurship. So even those early days when I moved next door to him, he helped me take care of my kid. When my wife was at work and his wife was at work, he would come over, bottle feed my daughter and stuff like that. On top of that, we would just grind and hustle together. So we would do Doordash and things like that. We had really good paying jobs in Silicon Valley tech company, and we traded all of that for modest living and hustling and doing the gig economy thing at night together. So I think it's kind of going through.
Jon's been in a fraternity I've never been in. Felt like this was rushing, I guess, right? We're entrepreneurs by day, and we're door dashing by night, like Jon said. Jon moved into an apartment next to me during the first years of Aggregate. And that made it convenient for us to be able to meet, speak with suppliers and vendors during the day, and also to help him watch his daughter, babysit during the day as well.
Yeah, I think the most part, like, why we like working together, it's we started as coworkers first, honestly. Like we weren't friends first, but we become really good friends, like family in a sense. And I think they say not to work with family and friends like that, but when we're building something on our own and we're like really this tight knit, I think it's important that you have those kind of bonds outside of work too. So yeah, we really understand each other, like on all ends, both at work and outside of work.
I think part of it is there's a strong communication between Jon and myself, and that's what I like working. That's what I like about Jon, working with him. And so yeah, I think communication is key with a business partner, with any business partner, in any product development scenario. And I think there's always going to be disagreements when it comes to design. The key is working out those disagreements and coming to a compromise to be able to get to an end goal. I think you turn something negative into something positive.
I'll just say it. Maybe everyone is going to find this. I think it's really painful to fight with Mike because I'm the only one yelling most of the time, and he's just very stoic. Like there's a previous example, like a couple days ago actually, I was super frustrated over, I think it was either process or budget, and I was like, I'm so frustrated, man. And I was like yelling during the meeting, and there was other people in that meeting, and Mike was just like, just don't be frustrated, Jon. Like, and like, but and it annoys the hell out of me, but it's actually really good because I think it, like Mike said before, we really balance each other out because we do need that fire and passion and that, going at it with a competitive nature, but you also need someone to, bring everyone back to calmness and reality, because especially during these times, like you can't always be high strung and stressed out all the time. You need some of that in order to push and get some stuff to happen. So I think the differences that we have, there's like tension because we're very different people, but that's why we should be partners, because what I don't bring to the table, he can kind of supplement and fill in for me in those strengths.
There's good tension and there's bad tension, and I think the tension that we have sometimes is, I think good tension is healthy. So that's what produces good work, and I think that's what produces good work.
Honestly, like, it was probably one of the first things we came up with that was different, because we were like, I think a few ideas Mike had, and then our other partner had was like, oh, let's use mushrooms or something like that. We're like, no, that's not gonna look good. So I think concrete was a decent material. We liked wood watches, but that had been done before. But just something that was rigid and hard enough that we could shape to like mold in terms of a form factor to what we would want. I think that concrete was like a pretty appropriate material for that. Obviously, it had a lot of problems, which Mike can talk about, of why he didn't want to use concrete.
Yeah.
But like funny story, like he was in China. The first round, he was in China first, just looking for factories. No factories wanted to work with us because they're like, no, we don't make watches in concrete, right? Like, that's why you guys doing that weird stuff. They're trying to have us do it in marble, in jade, and like all these very hard, rigid stone things you'd find on the countertops. And we probably could have done it with that, but we just felt like concrete was this like raw, unconventional material. It's kind of like us, like we're just like young dudes who are trying to create something that most smart, techie, entrepreneurial, savvy people would not think of. And so we just feel very anti-establishment almost of what has been done before, and so concrete kind of represented that raw nature.
Before we even thought about a concrete watch, we were brainstorming ideas. Watch one isn't even on the list. I don't know how we ended up with a concrete watch, but we sat down at a coffee shop in San Francisco with another industrial designer who at the time was discussing to be our third partner. But I guess things didn't work out, and we had some funding issues at the beginning. Jon and I somehow landed on a concrete watch. It never started that way. Some of the pain points that we experienced with working with concrete is trying to make it stable at such a small scale. With buildings, you have rebars, you can cast at a much larger scale. But with a concrete watch, with a dial and a bezel, it's much smaller scale. It wasn't intended to be craft for jewelry purposes. At least not the type of concrete that you're thinking of, that we all think about when we think of concrete, like stuff you buy from Home Depot or Lowe's. This is a very special mixture. It still has fibers in it to keep concrete, to keep the reinforcement in concrete when it cures, to prevent it from cracking, and to give it its strength. This is a high density anyway, it is a high density concrete mixture with higher strength than normal conventional concrete. It has additives, premixes to it that gives it strength. Another pain point that we experienced early on was color inconsistencies between the bezel and the dial. So it's really difficult to tune if you don't have all the components correct. So it's critical to have everything dialed in by like the 10th and hundredths of a gram, especially when it comes to color tuning. So with those inconsistencies, at the very last moment, we decided to apply a painted finish to both the dial and the bezels to maintain the color that we wanted. That was early on in the first batch. So the early adopters might have noticed that when the bezel chips, the concrete underneath is exposed. It might produce like a white color, especially on a black watch. Not very appealing, right? So today, our watches are the dials, the concrete dials, and the concrete bezels are all dyed concrete. So even if it chips, which it will still be homogeneous in color throughout.
To add on to that, like logistically, you can imagine how hard it is, because not only do we have to think of all the ingredients that go into the special mix of concrete, we have to figure out people to build it at scale. So it's one thing to like go on Etsy, right? Like we didn't want to be like an Etsy company. Like no offense to any Etsyers, but we wanted to make thousands of these, which we have. But that takes logistical planning and finding a factory that can actually do this, mass produce. And so how we do it now actually is we do some parts overseas in Asia, and then we do, some of the concrete, some of the formula, the powder we get from suppliers here in the States. Then we have, specialized jewelry mixers do it over here on the East Coast. And then we basically aggregate, pun intended, all of those pieces from Asia here in the States, and we put the watch together and then we deliver it to the customer. So it is tough.
Yeah. So the biggest pain point was finding a supplier at the beginning. We scrubbed through Alibaba and AliExpress and tried to find and reached out to personal contacts within our network. And so we landed on a few companies that were willing to entertain the idea. None of those actually executed. They never made samples for us either. And so instead they wanted to push their catalog onto us, which a lot of watch companies do. All they do is rebrand.
Yeah.
But we wanted an ODM to custom make at least our first few thousands of watches. So I had a family friend who helped us find and source a supplier in China. After about 3 to 4 months, they were able to help us dial in. They were able to retrofit part of their factory into a concrete manufacturing facility for our bezels and our dials. Originally, they're familiar with working with stone, and I think some of that background knowledge helped us create those concrete bezels and dials.
Yeah, there's a lot of finishing processes. In our first run, it's not the first run that we did is not how we make it now. Like we've made incremental improvements for sure, but that first run was like we had to, mold the part. Like the yield rate was horrible because the parts were cracking, and then then there's hand finishing involved too, right? So there's hand finishing, wet sanding, all that kind of stuff. So it's in terms of COGS, I think a lot of, if we were to pitch this to investors, they'd be like, man, you guys are spending way too much on the COGS. But it really wasn't about, this wasn't like a venture style business necessarily. This was like something of a passion for us where we really wanted to be entrepreneurs. And so we took the whole marketing strategy behind using concrete. It wasn't just because, hey, I want to go make a laptop out of cheese or just random material. Like this was actually a conscious effort, using design thinking actually, of how to provide value to a customer on an object, right? And if in fashion, the clothes that you wear, the accessories that you have, yeah, you can say like your bags and stuff, those are for more utility, but a watch or a bracelet, I mean, those are purely emotional buys because you're using it to express your personal style. And so by putting concrete in, we're making a watch specifically for those who are bold, who are artistic, who are designers, architects, people like ourselves who felt like everything else out there was too much of the same thing. There was this, during the time we made it in 2016, 2017, there was an influx of a lot of Kickstarter watch brands that were doing just like, they're basically just going to China, white labeling their logo on top of, these pretty standardized watches that everyone else was making. So we're like, all right, if we put a different material in it, it is going to make it special. It is going to provide value and that is the value. The value is that it allows you to be different. And so, very different approach than the design approach we would do for consumer electronics, where we're thinking about usability, ergonomics, things like that. And obviously we did some things like that, like we moved the crown to like 2 o'clock. But I would say for the most part, the whole point was to make something different enough so that you would have that emotional appeal to feel proud to wear it and feel that you're kind of like a step above the rest in terms of style and fashion.
I think for us it was important to focus on the details because the timepiece is so small. We had no choice but to focus on the details. So I think we spent a lot of time dialing in the watch to get it to look the way it is. If you look at the development and all the sketches and all the concepts that came to mind, you'll see the evolution. But I think having a timeline is important, especially when it comes to R&D. This is something that's new. It's an unfamiliar process to many manufacturers. So having a timeline, having a good manufacturing partner, I think is key whenever you're developing a new product, such as a company watch.
I wouldn't have changed how hard it was, because how difficult it was for us to do that. It's probably harder than us doing, consumer electronics, CMF. I've gone through like CMF challenges and things like that. And, Mike has gone through engineering challenges. This was unique because we were not only going through a very difficult manufacturing innovation process, we also had to figure out a way to feed our families at the same time. So everything was riding on that. And so I think thinking back on that, it was probably a really dumb and naive thing to do, to jump into hey, we're going to start a company to feed our families making concrete watches. But in all hindsight, I think it all worked out, and the difficulties and the challenges really put us where we are today.
I think that the best advice that we can give is probably enjoy the process. So there's a lot of challenges that come along the way. It's a learning experience for Jon and myself. This is our first company that we founded, that we bootstrapped. So everything from finances, from bookkeeping to loans, to credit cards, to working with suppliers,
to
logistics,
legal,
everything under the umbrella of the business. It's all learning, and that's part of the process. So it's important to enjoy. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
It's not for the light of heart.
It's definitely not for everyone.
One of the biggest successes of Aggregate at the beginning was we were fully funded on Kickstarter by the 3rd day.
Yep.
We reached our funding goal, and then we surpassed our funding goal. I think that was one of the biggest achievements, and put Jon and myself at ease that we were able to fund our initial production run.
Yeah, and I think the key success for Aggregate was getting into the market, getting into shelves even in some San Francisco stores. I think there's a few retailers here and even over in New York that ended up taking our watch and retailing it. So I think just seeing this vision that started from me and Mike sitting in our apartments, brainstorming on napkins and sketching, these crazy ideas, and then seeing this actually out in the world on GQ, right? On TV now, on CBS. It was cool to be able to tell my family they're going to feature us and the watches and our family on CBS. So that was really cool. Yeah, just and monetarily I would say it's not the most extraordinary, billion-dollar unicorn, but in research of what companies do within the first couple of years, I think Aggregate's done significantly for the revenue that it's created, and in terms of just culture impact and getting out there. Obviously there's challenges to overcome, and I think that's successful too, because businesses always run into problems, and Aggregate being kind of our first business, we have 2 businesses now obviously, but it showed us a lot of the problems that would arise, whether it's legal, whether it's logistics, or building and scaling a team. That's really helped us, just our overall business acumen.
There were collaborations along the way.
Adapt Clothing was a brand that I'm from the Bay Area, and a lot of my friends and I, we came up with that brand, and then to become friends with the CEO of Adapt, and we text each other. I texted him I think last week.
Yeah.
Shout
out to Evan.
Yeah, Evan, and we do collaborations with him now, and So just to become friends with people that you kind of like admired from afar, and now you're actually like, you know, they're like your homies now, right? So that's kind of cool.
If you like our story, hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll be sure to produce more content.
Awesome. See you guys later.
As design and fashion continuously innovate, it's refreshing to know that designers out there still want to take risks and be bold in terms of what materials they use. While a concrete watch may seem like a considerable risk to some, Jon and Mike have shown that there's no boundaries when it comes to imagination. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As Jon and Mike mentioned, please remember to like, subscribe, turn notifications on for alerts on our next video. See you guys next time.